talk about the news reports about AI has kind of infiltrating this space, and there's a new technology thing over here. But what you're doing in multifamily, particularly with this fund, as we talk about it, is so
Yep,
remarkable.
yeah, we're
And
working on closing about three right now. So we focus on the Class C space, and so what we do is we're looking for value add type typically properties. 1976, and so the states are a little bit different with the year between 76, 78, but as an average, you can say 76, and really what we're just saying is they're old apartments.
yeah.
There's nothing wrong with them.
Well, hello, Chris Wise. How are you?
Good, thank you for having me.
It's wonderful to talk to you today, and I'm so inspired about what you're doing in the multifamily space. We talk about the news reports about AI is kind of infiltrating this space, and there's a new technology thing over here. But what you're doing in multifamily, particularly with this fund, as we talk about it, is so remarkable. And I think it's part of kind of the rising tide that we're in America, lifting all the boats. So
Right.
first, let me explain. You're Chris Wise and president of Wise Capital LLC. So you didn't start out doing that though, though you had a chance to be a lawyer. And in your law firm, you had a chance to develop your own marketing company rather than pay marketing agency rates. And though you've exited that marketing agency itself once it was built out, you're turning your attention now, while still involved in the law, to building this accredited fund. So accredited investors can invest in multifamily in a way that actually has social impact for the community. So the AI technologies that you have learned and are now applying in the multifamily real estate space is so fascinating. So chat with me a little bit about these properties you're collecting and putting in your fund in the Midwest, in Florida, in Texas. How's it going?
Mhm.
You have three or four that are kind of in the hopper?
Yep, yeah, we're working on closing about three right now. So we focus on the Class C space, and so what we do is we're looking for value add type properties, and so the Class C space is typically ignored by institutions. I think the stigma is that there's bad tenants, high deferred maintenance,
Mhm.
maybe the location's bad, occupancy may be bad. And the reality is none of that is true as an average standard there. I mean, really what we're looking at in the Class C space is typically, a 90% plus occupancy rate. Location is all over there. I mean, and some of those apartments are in the best parts that anyone would want to live in. And really what we do is when you think of Class C and you actually break that down, that's really just an apartment that was built typically 1976. And so the states are a little bit different with the year between 76, 78, but as an average, you can say 76. And really what we're just saying is they're old apartments.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with them. It doesn't mean that they have a
They have
tremendous
mature
amount of,
trees, probably.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, when we look at them, we're looking for, ways that we can add value and social impact, and it has to make sense. They cash flow just like any other multifamily apartment that you would want to be a part of. And then implementing our technology to improve the lives of those tenants, and also, scale beyond that into building a community around it. So it's not just a place that someone pays rent, falls asleep, goes to work,
Right.
and then looks for a new place in the next 6 months or a year, but rather, kind of drive the desire to want to stay there long term because of how they're treated. I mean, this is very much hospitality driven. And so
Yes.
that's the starting point for us.
The addition of the technology, we talked about how you're not just looking at, pretty common cash flow properties, 90% occupancy, a decent part of town, and some rehabbing that's done because the building was built in 1976 on average. And while it may have had fresh coats of paint and so on, there's going to be some rehab in those buildings. But in America, so many kids are coming out of college with, very heavy loads of student debt and no hope of buying a house in the next 10 years. And so they are going to be in multifamily units. I mean, that's where they're going to live if they climb out of their parents' basement, and
Yeah.
they're going to find a roommate, live in an apartment, or if they get married and start saving for a house, it's not next year or the year after that that they'll have money for a house probably. So there's a very big need for great multifamily housing. And that generation is technology savvy. So the kind of Internet of Things, the IoT that you're offering in your real estate rehabs, it's locks and it's lights and it's security and it's window film and it's property management interface. A bot that you can at 2 in the morning say the tub is leaking, or whatever's going on.
Yeah.
Technology is just making that so easy to facilitate, and you're looking at new tenants that expect to run their world from their iPhone. So it's like, wait,
Yeah.
don't I just turn my phone on and say, hey, this is going on for me? And also, now I also just paid the rent, and so you're kind of facilitating that generation of coming into housing, and it's really high-end units. You would expect that level of IoT, that level of, technology interface. You're making it available in apartment buildings built in 1976. So I have to imagine tenants are like, where do I find one of those? How do I sign up?
Yeah. Yeah, the products and software and all that, they can become so expensive. And so that's why you see this typically in those luxury class A type apartments. And it's also why we were driven to build our own technology and build it in-house,
Mhm,
was to make it to where, if I go into a class C apartment and try to outfit 40 units with $1,200 locks, that's a tough thing to overcome. I mean, that's a tough metric to get over. But if we can create our own and have the fun of imagining a world where a lock does,
mhm,
something special, whatever it may be, whether it's like a fob and then security, the numbers are rearranging
mhm,
and you're able to open your door with an app and all this other stuff, that's the fun part of it. And also you can create those for, between 17 and $40, depending on scale and manufacturing and all that.
mhm,
And you can do that in-house versus going, for a $40 product that we've built, tested, and implemented is much better than going and saying, well, we just spent $1,200, per door just on locks. And
right,
that doesn't include running the system that drives that.
right.
And so that's really where this got started is, okay, well, we want to create this change and social impact in a community, and especially, these Class C properties that typically are overlooked. Institutions aren't really looking at these type of properties
Mhm,
and, actually drive real change and do it in a way and prove that we can do it in a way
mhm.
that is scalable and affordable, not only for the tenants, but also for, future apartments that look to do the same.
Well, 90% occupancy you've talked about as buildings begin to get rehabbed. You don't move people out wholesale. It's as the leases come due, the normal, whatever that cycle of attrition is, and then you
Yeah.
rehab them one, two, three at a time. That the current tenants want to move into the new one. They want to move into the rehabbed one because it has
Yeah.
all this cool stuff, So it's like, I'm going to move 4 doors down the hallway because I'm going to be in that new unit with all the cool stuff. So I could see that it's adding value. And then to think about reducing overhead at 40%, you've perked up an investor's ears. It's like not only
Yeah.
is it going to be have a high occupancy rate, not only can we get a decent rent for that unit because they see all the added value, but your overhead is so much lower. So there's so much more margin available in the cash flow that already exists. So as you work with accredited investors, can you tell me a little bit what an accredited investor is? What does that mean?
Yeah, and I know the SEC has their guidelines on what, specifically that is. It's different for companies and trusts than individuals or
Mhm,
tenants in common or
mhm,
just a single investor or what have you. So the I'll say the basic definition, which is for an individual, typically it's $1 million net worth.
mhm,
If you don't have that, then typically it's a for an individual 200,000 in income over the last I believe 2 years.
mhm,
Now that compliance is going to yell at me, but if
mhm,
it's a married couple, it's 300,000. And I do believe they go back 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what we do just along with what the SEC suggests is we get third party letters that prove that they're accredited through
Right.
the probably 15 different ways that you can be considered accredited depending on organizations or things of that nature.
So most accredited investors understand they're an accredited investor, right? They look at a class of
Mhm.
securities and investments because they have financial security. So they can
Mhm.
accept a little more risk, and there's the SEC that decides what all of that is. So this isn't for just mom and pop, to say, I've got an extra $1,000 and I'm going to invest in this fund. It's not that. But the social impact that's available, 80 or 100 units at a pop in a community. I even heard a rumor of an ice cream truck making an appearance on a property. So you're
Yeah.
doing a lot to create community among the tenants who actually live there. So they want to keep living there.
Yeah, we're hospitality driven. And so, the locks and the sensors and everything, that's really cool technology. And it definitely makes life a little bit easier, at least more convenient. But at the end of the day, if it keeps breaking or it doesn't work, or you have to talk to 17 people to figure out how to use it,
Mhm.
you really fail at that hospitality side. And so that's where we start, instead of just throw everything in and hope that they know how to use technology, the tenant knows how to use technology is not the best plan. So it's very much, let's start from the beginning. These are the numbers that you can contact. This is going to get you immediately, in touch with the desired, individual, whether it be a property manager, maintenance, or what have you.
Mhm.
And then from there, rent collections, a great example, being able to do that from your phone. I know you mentioned that earlier.
Mhm.
There's the days of paying with a, uh, you know, money order check
Or
or
a paper
cash.
check in the slot by the front
Yeah.
door, and it has to be there by midnight on the 5th or whatever the rules are. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've really changed as a country to kind of step away from that, and so now it's how do you make it more easier and convenient, and that's the starting point.
Yeah. Well, when you think about social impact, the impact of communities, when you have a strong, unit that has 100 people, 100 units, so maybe that's 200, 250 people living there, and they feel like they're part of a vibrant community. They want to stay there for years. So the guy down the hall, the guy downstairs, the woman who lives in the corner unit, you get to know each other. You have kind of a mini city.
Mhm.
People that are happy to be living there. And that changes the nature of a community.
Absolutely. I think, the little fun things that we plan out and do, the ice cream truck's a great example. You don't get you don't get a return on it. It's not like, we made money off of it. That's not the intent. The intent is, you drive the community together, know your neighbor type deal. And
Mhm.
it makes a lot of the conversations easier and kind of
Mhm.
drives that community focus. And it's something as silly as an ice cream truck,
Mhm.
that's not a massive investment by any means, but having something out there for an hour to just get to kind of know everybody and for us to go out there and actually, be with the tenants and talk with them, see how things are going and working and
Mhm.
what issues are they having. It kind of takes away that veil that typically happens in this space where it's, I don't know who owns this. It's really frustrating because they won't listen to me. They won't. No, I mean you're there. You're there. You know exactly who everybody is, and if not, then you're introducing and just being present and solving those problems that we may not even know exist at that time. And so it's having that open dialogue and being able to create actual change that again drives that community effect where people go, you know what, I could move, but this is really nice to be able to have, if an issue comes up, it's addressed, immediately and it's followed up on and then it's, there's people that make sure that this was taken care of and there's a true care factor there. I keep calling it hospitality, but that's really what we're doing. And the technology is really cool and we're developing some pretty crazy stuff that we think is really exciting and that does make it significantly different than what you would see in any other Class C space. But at the core, it's got to be that hospitality. It's got to be that social impact where we're getting in front of people and actually making the changes that need to be made before we start, creating really cool products and hoping that that's what everybody wants.
Well,
So
happy
that's really,
tenants do stay, and happy tenants
yeah.
will handle a little bit of a rent increase because they
Mhm.
don't want to move. And I just think it's so important to think about the way you're approaching this investment fund is, happy people in rehabbed, modernized buildings because of the proprietary software solutions that you have. It makes it safer. It makes it
Mhm.
more efficient. It makes it easier, cheaper to operate, but not at the cost of an absentee landlord or some faceless corporation in, 5 states away who could care less, if the cupboard door fell off. You know what I mean? I think what
Mhm.
happens too in multifamily is you look to see what is the turnover of tenants in terms of your safety. Did
Mhm.
somebody just move in with 3 pit bulls and nobody's paying attention? Now my kids can't play out there on the lawn because, this is going on and nobody's minding the store. You guys really are paying attention. That sense of community creates a sense of safety too. Like, I could do 18 months here. I could do 3 years here and save for my down payment, or finish grad school and then go get my job in, some other state. But they could have a stretch of time where they feel very comfortable in there. That's what investors want to hear.
Absolutely. And you mentioned a really good point just a second ago. If all we're doing is raising rents, you're going to create problems. I mean, it just raising rents alone does not solve the mountain of problems that exist in some of these properties. And so really what we start with is the expenses. And typically it's property management. We've seen some trailing 12s that have been absolutely shocking. I mean, from we would consider 6%, and you go through the numbers and you're finding that it's really like 17%. And people just have no clue because they don't realize that there's tenant retention and
Mhm,
tenant turnover and travel fees. And you just add up all these expenses
mhm,
and they're going, well, it's really difficult to make this cash flow. And it's like, well, no, it's you don't realize that you're spending all of this on things that really aren't driving any value, not just for the tenant, but for anybody involved in it. And so, that's a big starting point for us is we have to look at these value add properties and go, if we took this over, what could we do in the beginning that's going to drive some momentum of change? And again, if it's just, hey, we raise rent, you're going to lose most of your tenants. Eventually, you're just going to be a marketing company that's selling the product of a unit, and that's what it becomes. And so it is, more than just raising rent. It's how do you reduce expenses to where this makes sense? How do
mhm,
you drive community involvement,
mhm.
community change? There was an apartment we were looking at a couple months ago that we really loved. And, they're all 3 bed, 2 bath units, and there's about 50 of them. And, I'd go there and I start talking to a tenant, and I was shocked that there was no playground. I was like, for 3 beds, 2 baths, typically you would think,
That's
there'd
right.
be a
That's not three
playground.
roommates. There's a kid in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and come to find out, no, there was no families there. There's typically just one person staying in a larger apartment, and
Mhm,
so what we thought, oh, we'll put dog parks and we'll put a playground and
mhm,
do this and that. Well, that wasn't helping any of the tenants. I mean, it looked cool and it looked pretty, but
mhm,
it did nothing. And so, again, it's really evaluating kind of the deal by deal basis on what makes sense to the tenants that are there,
mhm,
and what is it that we need to change, now and why, and then go from there. And something like that is just a great example of on paper makes a ton of sense, but then you kind of get on the ground and you walk through and you go, oh. Yeah, that's a horrible idea.
This is not what they
But you
need.
got
The
to be
sunk
there.
cost of this is going to give me no return from the tenants. Well, I like
Right.
your systems thinking, because you're using proprietary IoT products, Internet of Things, that we discussed before we got on air together, that you can open a box that's a Ring doorbell camera or open a box that's, locks that are responsive to your phone. those systems don't necessarily work together. But you've designed integrated systems. All of it works
Mhm.
together, including how you get a hold of the property manager and how you pay your rent. And so that kind of seamless solution of a multifaceted technology, involvement in the units, that's the way to go, is to design from the beginning to include those key factors so they all work together.
Yeah, and I think that the benefit to it is once you kind of create it and go through the research and development phase, it really opens the door to things that are driven by imagination,
Mhm.
right? And that's the best part about it is you enter into, I mean, even the office spaces or you enter into, different homes, my own home, and you just go, man, it would be really nice if we could create something that takes care of this problem. Like, wouldn't it be nice if that
Yeah.
existed?
Mhm.
And once you have that system in development, you're able to kind of play with it and create these things from scratch. And, that's the beauty of it. Now, we don't license any of our stuff and we deliberately don't do that. And
Mhm.
that's because, again, we've got to make sure that, we have control over everything, make sure that all the kinks are worked out with us
Mhm.
before we just try to license it out. And a great example are the locks, right? Our first lock ever that I created, fantastic. From a security standpoint, the numbers would rearrange. You can do fob. You can open it with your app on a phone.
Mhm.
Uh, but we never, I just when I created it said, well, it'll be in common spaces. They'll walk inside in the common space, then they could mess with their lock to open the door. And
Mhm.
then the first apartment we work on, they had no common spaces. It was all outside. And
Oh,
we're like, well, the casing on it, I'm not, has anyone thought about if this is rated to handle the heat and the snow and the rain?
yeah.
And it was like, well, that's a lesson learned. That would be a nightmare to figure that out if we had licensed and we're sending it out to a bunch of individuals who are trying to implement it in their own apartments or homes.
Well,
And
we're finding
so,
these systems, yeah, over the multi-units, you're going to have quite the laboratory to really make special
mm,
situations. I've heard the stories of there's a power outage and the Wi-Fi's out and your refrigerator stops working. Because it's a smart refrigerator. And so
yeah.
like, you have an error message on your refrigerator. You're like, why do I have an error message on the fridge? So yeah, I mean, I think those connections, that design process of thinking it all the way through is going to be so amazing. And that younger generation, they want everything driven from apps and from their phone, and they want the ease
Mm,
and the security of that. And the fun byproduct is much lower overhead costs, for what your management is costing you. So when I was talking about, law school and then building out a marketing agency, which you've exited from that was helping to sell, services, you quoted Steve Jobs when you talked about, I couldn't really connect the dots in my career until I looked back. And so
yeah.
looking back, you're able to connect the dots of what brought you here in multifamily investment with an emphasis on technology and strong communities.
Yeah, and it's funny. I stand by that quote completely. I think that it is if it was forward thinking, I think it becomes too daunting
Mhm.
and you kind of get scared off from doing it, right? And you
Mhm.
just take one step and solve the next problem and solve the next problem, and then you realize, oh, well, I built that AI technology to really handle, sales and updates and invoicing all that for a law firm. And
Mhm.
then, I solved that problem. And then I thought, oh, wow, we could really use this for a lot of different things that, again, it kind of opens up that train of thought for imagination and solving problems that
Mhm.
no one's really focused on. And then from there, just kind of scaled it until we got to a point where we said, well, multifamily is a great example of this. No one is touching these units. And, when you think of Class C property, almost anyone you talk to, they're going to think, again, bad location, a ton of deferred maintenance, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of deferred maintenance, tenants that are difficult to work with.
Mhm.
And none of it's true. I mean, could you
Mhm.
have a tenant? Sure. Could you have deferred minutes? Absolutely.
Mhm.
But is that why it's Class C? No, it's not. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with when it was built. So,
Mhm.
it's been very interesting looking back and going, oh, if I didn't get really upset because, everybody was on the phone and we were missing calls, I would have never thought to create something to solve that problem. And then that's, built off itself into solving other
The
problems. And then,
dominoes, yeah.
yeah,
That's so
yeah. And
great.
then,
Well, you've built a better mousetrap with multifamily. I mean, how you're going
yeah,
about this. And you have a fund where accredited investors can invest in this better mousetrap. I mean, this is really something, and it's a win for the neighbors. It's a win for the community. It's a win for the tenants, a win for the investors. So, yeah, it's exciting what you've done. Every time I talk with someone about AI, there's another new innovative way that it's making life better. I don't think Skynet's going to take us over, but if it does, at
yeah.
least we'll have happy tenants. So, you know,
Yeah.
strong communities.
Well, it's fascinating. I know there's always the scare factor, and I mean, I think you've heard it just like I have over the last year or so, where people are concerned about jobs and whether it's going to take over all the jobs in the world. And the reality is, it just can't. I've played with this so much, and I've found that it can make individuals more efficient and effective, but to fully replace them is a very, very difficult concept to really, make real.
Right.
And so, when you think about property management, for example, we can answer all the questions in the world through text and AI and all that, but you still have to have somebody go and talk with an individual and
Yeah.
solve an individual that requires a actual person. And so at least today, I definitely do not think we're anywhere near having robots
Humans are
run the
not
world
yet
and
obsolete. I think
Terminator.
we have some generations to go before the humans are obsolete. Well, it's really exciting
Yeah.
what you're doing. Tell people how to get a hold of you. Wise Capital LLC, is LinkedIn the best way, or we'll put all of the links in the show notes too. But if they want to get a hold of you and explore this, or say, hey, I'm selling a Class C property and it is in the Midwest,
Yeah.
Florida or Texas, or,
Mhm.
my son's going to college there, and wouldn't it be nice to have an affordable, safe building somebody's paying attention to thousands of miles away from where I raised him? If people
Yeah.
want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, LinkedIn is typically the best. You can visit us on our website as well at investwisecap.com. And I know you said you have the links there, but
Mhm.
that our head of capital markets, his name's Clint. He's always reachable again through LinkedIn or through Clint at investwisecap.com. But those are typically the best ways to get a hold of us.
Very good. Well, congratulations on this new venture, and I'm excited about the people who are going to live in these communities. I'm a little bit jealous about all the tech all installed and you just move in. I'm a little bit
Yeah.
jealous. So,
Yeah, it's
congratulations, though.
thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it was nice to talk to you today. Well, thanks, everybody. We'll see
Yeah.
you all the next time.
Thank you.